The rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway marked another sleepless night for Kate Anderson. At 28, she'd grown accustomed to the sound, just as she'd adapted to the quiet footsteps and occasional tremors that betrayed her mother Helen's midnight wanderings. The old Victorian house on Maple Street had been their sanctuary for decades, but lately, its creaking floorboards seemed to echo with unspoken secrets. Kate adjusted her mother's medication organizer under the dim kitchen light, her practiced hands sorting pills into their designated compartments. The routine was as familiar as breathing: morning doses of carbidopa, afternoon tablets of ropinirole, evening capsules that promised better sleep but rarely delivered. Each prescription bottle represented another piece of the complex puzzle that had become her life since her mother's Parkinson's diagnosis. "Katie." Helen's voice drifted from the living room, slightly slurred from fatigue. "Is that you?" "Yes, Mom. Just preparing your meds for tomorrow." Kate forced cheerfulness into her voice, though exhaustion pulled at her shoulders. She glanced at her phone, another missed call from the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Her supervisor had been understanding about her need for flexible shifts, but patience was wearing thin. Something would have to give eventually. The sound of shuffling papers made Kate pause. Lately, her mother had taken to rummaging through old documents late at night, hiding them away when anyone approached. Kate had dismissed it as another quirk of the disease, but something about Helen's furtive movements suggested otherwise. "Do you need help organizing those files?" Kate called out, trying to keep her tone casual. "No." The response came too quickly, followed by the distinct sound of a drawer slamming shut. "Everything's fine, dear. Just looking for an old recipe." The lie hung heavy in the air between them. Kate pressed her palms against the cool kitchen counter, fighting the urge to probe further. Their carefully maintained peace felt increasingly fragile, like a soap bubble ready to burst at the slightest touch. Her brother Eric's sudden call earlier that day hadn't helped matters. After 3 years of minimal contact, just occasional holiday cards and brief phone calls, he was coming home. "Family business to discuss," he'd said, his voice carrying that smooth, practiced tone he'd developed since moving to Chicago to pursue his entrepreneurial dreams. The same tone he'd used when explaining why he couldn't come home for Christmas, why he couldn't help with Mom's medical appointments, why everything always fell to Kate. The grandfather clock struck midnight, its chimes eerily loud in the quiet house. Kate heard her mother's soft gasp from the living room, followed by more rustling papers. Whatever Helen was hiding, it was clearly causing her distress. Kate had seen the tremors worsen over the past week, noticed how her mother barely touched her food at dinner. "Mom." Kate stepped toward the living room, but Helen's voice stopped her. "I'm going to bed now, sweetheart. Don't stay up too late. You need your rest." More shuffling, the tap-tap of Helen's cane on hardwood, and then the slow progression of footsteps up the stairs. Kate waited until she heard the click of her mother's bedroom door before entering the living room. The desk drawer was shut tight, but a corner of yellowed paper peeked out, like a tongue holding back secrets. Kate's phone buzzed, a text from Eric: "Flight lands at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Big news about the house. Don't tell Mom yet." The house. Their anchor, their haven, the one constant through all the storms they'd weathered. Kate's fingers hovered over the drawer handle, temptation warring with respect for her mother's privacy. Whatever Eric was planning, whatever Helen was hiding, tomorrow would change everything. She could feel it in her bones, as surely as she could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. The grandfather clock ticked on, counting down the hours until their carefully constructed world would begin to unravel. The morning sun cast long shadows through the kitchen windows as Kate watched her mother meticulously straighten the place settings for the third time. Helen's hands trembled more than usual, causing the silverware to clink against the ceramic plates. "Mom, sit down. I'll finish setting the table," Kate said, gently touching her mother's shoulder. The past hour had been a whirlwind of nervous energy, Helen insisting on preparing Eric's favorite breakfast despite her increasingly unreliable motor control, refusing Kate's offers of help until she'd dropped and broken one of their grandmother's teacups. "He always liked everything just so," Helen murmured, adjusting a fork that was already perfectly aligned. "The napkins folded in triangles, not rectangles. Remember how he used to throw fits about that when he was little?" Kate remembered. She also remembered how those childhood perfectionist tendencies had evolved into something harder, more demanding, as Eric grew older. The way he'd criticize their mother's trembling hands at dinner, his impatience with her slower movements, until finally he'd announced his move to Chicago, where things actually happen, he'd said. The doorbell rang at exactly 10:15 a.m. Helen startled, knocking over a glass of orange juice. As Kate rushed to clean up the spill, she caught sight of her mother hurriedly shoving something into her cardigan pocket, another mysterious document. "I'll get it," Kate said, but Helen was already making her way to the door, her cane tapping an irregular rhythm on the hardwood floors. Eric stood on the porch, looking every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit and designer briefcase. But something in his eyes, a tightness around the corners, a flickering uncertainty, made Kate's stomach clench. "Mom," he said, his voice softening as he embraced Helen. "You look well." A lie, and they all knew it. Helen had lost weight, her clothes hanging loose on her frame, dark circles beneath her eyes telling tales of sleepless nights. But she beamed at her son as if he'd given her the greatest compliment. Come in," Helen urged, her voice bright with forced cheer. "I made your favorite, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup. The expensive kind, from that little shop in Vermont." Eric's smile faltered for a moment. "Actually, Mom, I thought we could talk first." "Family meeting, in the living room?" Kate watched her mother's face pale slightly, her hands clutching her cane tighter. "The pancakes will get cold." "This is important, Mom." Eric set his briefcase on the coffee table, the expensive leather incongruous against the worn surface. "It's about the house." The next 20 minutes unfolded like a carefully rehearsed play, with Eric as the director. He pulled out glossy brochures of retirement communities, spreadsheets of financial projections, all leading to his grand finale, the suggestion to sell their home. "The market's hot right now," he explained, his voice taking on the smooth cadence he probably used in business presentations. "We could get top dollar, enough to cover any debts and set you up somewhere more manageable." "Debts?" Kate interrupted, watching her mother shrink further into herself. "What debts?" Eric's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features. "You mean you don't know?" "Mom, you haven't told her." Helen's hands were shaking violently now, no longer just the familiar tremors of her condition. "Eric, please. The property taxes haven't been paid in months," Eric continued, pulling out more papers. "And there's a second mortgage that's—" "Stop." Helen's voice cracked like a whip, startling them both. She struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. I need to get something." They watched her shuffle toward the desk in the corner, the same desk where she'd been hiding documents the night before. Kate's heart pounded as her mother pulled open the drawer with trembling fingers. But what Helen withdrew wasn't just another piece of paper. It was a thick manila envelope, its edges worn soft with age and handling. Across the front, in faded blue ink, was written, "Eric's Business Loan, 2020. The room went deadly quiet. Eric's face drained of color as Helen slowly made her way back to them, the envelope extended like an offering, or an accusation. "I think," Helen said, her voice barely above a whisper, "it's time we all knew the truth." Kate reached for the envelope, but Eric was faster. His hands shook almost as much as their mother's as he tried to take it, but Helen held firm. "Mom," he pleaded, "some things are better left." "No," Helen cut him off, steel entering her voice. "No more secrets. Kate deserves to know why you're really here. Why you're really so interested in selling the house." The grandfather clock in the hallway began to chime 11, each strike like a hammer falling on Kate's racing heart. As Helen opened the envelope, years of carefully constructed lies began to crumble, and Kate realized that the brother she thought she knew might be a stranger after all. The loan documents spread across the coffee table told a story that made Kate's head spin. $200,000, borrowed against their family home, all of it given to Eric for his sure thing investment opportunity in Chicago. The dates aligned perfectly with his sudden move, his growing distance, his constant excuses for not visiting. Every page revealed another layer of deception, each signature a betrayal written in ink. "I was going to pay it back," Eric said, his polished facade cracking under the weight of exposure. The crypto market was booming. Everyone said it couldn't fail. Crypto. Kate's voice rose sharply, causing Helen to flinch. "You gambled our mother's house on cryptocurrency." The blueberry pancake sat forgotten in the kitchen, going cold like the pit forming in Kate's stomach. She thought of all the extra shifts she'd picked up at the hospital, the endless juggling of bills and medications, while Eric had been playing with their mother's financial security like chips in a casino. Helen's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she tried to fold the papers back into their envelope. "I wanted to help him succeed," she whispered. "He had such big dreams, just like his father." "Don't." Kate's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't you dare compare him to Dad. Dad would never have dash. You don't know what Dad would have done." Eric shot to his feet, his carefully pressed suit wrinkled from sitting tensely. "You were always too young to understand the pressure he put on me. His only son, the one who had to carry on the family name, make something of himself. So you made something of yourself by stealing from your sick mother." "I didn't steal anything. Mom agreed to it. She signed the papers." Kate turned to Helen, who seemed to be trying to make herself smaller in her chair. "Did you understand what you were signing? Did he explain the risks?" Helen's silence was answer enough. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." Eric ran his hands through his hair, disheveling his perfect businessman appearance. "The market was going to recover. I had inside information." "From whom?" "The same people who convinced you to invest in the first place." Kate pulled up her phone, quickly searching for cryptocurrency news from that period. "Let me guess, you bought in at the peak, right before the crash." Eric's face flushed red. "You don't understand how these markets work. Nobody could have predicted dash." "Enough." Helen's quiet voice somehow cut through their argument. "What's done is done. The question is, what do we do now?" Kate took a deep breath, trying to think like the nurse she was, analyzing problems and finding solutions. "How much time do we have before the bank forecloses?" 3 months, Eric admitted. "That's why I came back now. If we sell quickly, we can at least control the process, maybe get enough to set Mom up somewhere decent and still have something left over." "Left over for what?" "Your next investment opportunity." "Katie, please." Helen reached for her daughter's hand. "He's still your brother." The word brother stuck in Kate's throat like a fishbone. She looked at Eric, really looked at him, seeing past the expensive suit and practiced smile to the scared little boy who used to crawl into her bed during thunderstorms. When had he changed? Or had she just been too busy taking care of everyone else to notice? "There might be another way," Helen said hesitantly, pulling another document from her cardigan pocket, the one she'd been trying to hide earlier. "I've been in contact with a lawyer." Both children turned to stare at their mother. In the sudden silence, the grandfather clock's ticking seemed to grow louder, marking time like a metronome of revelation. "A lawyer?" Eric's voice cracked slightly. "What kind of lawyer?" "The kind who specializes in financial fraud." Helen's hands were steady now as she unfolded the paper. "An elder abuse." The color drained from Eric's face. "Mom, you can't be serious. I'm your son." "Yes," Helen said, tears gathering in her eyes. And that's the only reason I haven't filed these papers yet. But Katie needs to know everything now, including what you did with the second mortgage. Kate felt her breath catch. Second mortgage? What second mortgage? Eric took an involuntary step backward, bumping into the bookshelf behind him. A framed family photo, taken at Kate's nursing school graduation, toppled and cracked, spiderweb fracture spreading across the glass like the breaks in their family's foundation. Eric? Kate's voice was dangerously quiet now. What else did you do? The grandfather clock struck noon, each chime like a countdown to another devastating truth. As Eric opened his mouth to respond, Kate saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before, not guilt, not remorse, but fear. Real, visceral fear. And she realized that what they'd discovered so far was only the beginning. The second mortgage document bore Helen's signature, dated just 6 months ago. But as Kate studied the shaky handwriting, something felt off. The loops were too perfect, the lines too steady for her mother's tremor-affected penmanship. This isn't Mom's signature, she said, her nursing training in documentation coming in handy. I've been signing her prescription refills for months. The handwriting's completely different. Eric's expensive watch caught the afternoon light as he reached for the paper. Don't be ridiculous. Of course it's her signature. Mom, tell her. But Helen was staring at the document with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. I never signed this. I would remember signing something this important. The room seemed to tilt on its axis as the implications sank in. Kate felt her professional calm slipping away, replaced by a rage so pure it frightened her. You forged Mom's signature. You committed fraud. It's not that simple. Eric's composure finally cracked completely. I needed the money to cover margin calls. The broker said if I could just hold on a little longer, everything would turn around. I was going to fix it all before anyone found out. Fix it? Kate's laugh was harsh. Like you fixed the first loan. How much did you take this time? Eric's silence was deafening. How much? 150,000, he whispered. Helen made a small, broken sound, like a bird hitting a window. Her tremors had gotten so bad that her cane clattered against the hardwood floor. Mom! Kate rushed to steady her mother, helping her to the sofa. Deep breaths, remember what the doctor said. Try to stay calm. Calm. Eric's voice rose hysterically. There's nothing calm about this situation. Do you know what happens to people who default on these kinds of loans? What happens to their families? Are you seriously trying to make yourself the victim here? Kate snapped, rubbing Helen's back as her mother struggled to control her breathing. After what you've done. What I've done. What about what you've done? Eric's face contorted with years of buried resentment. You've been the perfect daughter, haven't you? Living at home, taking care of Mom, making me look like the bad guy for daring to have a life outside this mausoleum of a house. A life? Is that what you call gambling away our mother's security? Her home? At least I tried to make something of myself. What have you done except hide behind Mom's illness? The words hit Kate like a physical blow. She felt Helen tense beside her, heard her mother's sharp intake of breath. Hide. Kate's voice was deadly quiet now. I work 50-hour weeks at the hospital. I manage Mom's medications, her appointments, her therapy sessions. I handle the bills, the real ones, not your get-rich-quick schemes. I'm here every single day, watching her struggle, fighting to keep her independent, while you're off playing Gordon Gekko with her retirement. I never asked you to do any of that. Eric shouted. You chose that role. You love it, being the martyr, the saint. Well, guess what? Your sacrifices don't make you better than me. They just make you scared, scared of living your own life. Stop it. Helen's voice cracked through the air like summer lightning. Both of you, stop it right now. In the sudden silence, they could hear the grandfather clock ticking, marking seconds that felt like years. Helen struggled to her feet, refusing help from either of her children. "I need to show you something else," she said, her voice trembling but determined. She made her way to the desk again, this time pulling out a thick folder from the bottom drawer. "I've been keeping records. Of everything." "Records?" Eric's voice had gone hoarse. "Bank statements. Phone calls. Emails." Helen's hands shook as she opened the folder. "And surveillance footage from the bank the day this second mortgage was supposedly signed." The color drained from Eric's face. "Surveillance footage? I may be sick," Helen said, her voice growing stronger, "but I'm not stupid. When the bank called to confirm a withdrawal I never made, I started investigating. And I found, oh, Eric. What have you done?" She pulled out a USB drive, small and innocent looking, yet it seemed to fill the room with its presence. "Mom," Eric took a step toward her, "whatever you think you have there dash. Don't." Helen's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Don't you dare try to talk your way out of this. Not anymore." Kate watched her brother's face, seeing the exact moment his mask of contrition cracked, revealing something darker underneath. His hand twitched toward the USB drive, and suddenly she knew, with absolute certainty, that he wouldn't leave this room without it. The grandfather clock began to strike 3, each chime like a hammer falling on the final nails of their family's coffin. As Eric took another step toward their mother, Kate realized she had mere seconds to decide: protect the evidence, or protect her mother from what was about to happen next. Kate moved before she could second-guess herself, years of emergency room reflexes taking over. She stepped between Eric and Helen, her body blocking his path to the USB drive. Behind her, she could feel her mother's trembling form, hear the rapid, shallow breathing that signaled rising anxiety. "Think very carefully about your next move," Kate said, her voice carrying the same calm authority she used with agitated patience. "Because whatever you're planning, it ends here." Eric's face twisted into something unrecognizable, a stranger wearing her brother's features. "You don't understand what's at stake here. That drive could ruin everything. My career, my future dash." "Your future?" Helen's voice quavered. "What about mine? What about the home your father built for us? The home you mortgaged away without my knowledge? I did it for us. For the family." Eric's expensive suit seemed to constrain him as he paced, like a caged animal. "If you'd just let me handle this my way, I could still fix everything. The way you fixed the first loan." Kate kept her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Or the way you fixed your crypto investments. Face it, Eric. You're not trying to save this family. You're trying to save yourself." Through the bay window, late afternoon shadows stretched across the living room floor. Kate caught a glimpse of their neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, walking her dog past their house. Such a normal scene, while their world imploded behind these walls. "You always were Dad's favorite," Eric spat at Kate. "Little Miss Perfect, who could do no wrong. You have no idea what it's like living in that shadow. The pressure, the expectations dash." "Expectations?" Helen's voice cut through his tirade. "Your father never expected you to steal from your family. He expected you to be honest, to work hard dash." "Hard work?" Eric laughed, an ugly sound. "Like his hard work? 30 years at the same company, nothing to show for it but this old house and a pile of medical bills." Kate felt her mother flinch at the words. "Dad left us something more valuable than money," she said. "He left us integrity. Something you clearly wouldn't understand." Eric's hand shot out suddenly, reaching past Kate toward the USB drive. But Helen was quicker than anyone expected, her trembling fingers closing around the small device as she stepped back. "I've already made copies," Helen said quietly. "Multiple copies. With different lawyers. Eric froze, his arms still outstretched. You're bluffing. Am I? Helen's chin lifted slightly. Call Gerald Matthews at the firm downtown. Or Sarah Chen at Regional Trust Bank. They both have very interesting files on their desks right now. Kate watched her brother's face cycle through emotions, disbelief, anger, fear, and finally, something like calculation. He straightened his tie, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache for the brother she used to know. Fine, he said, his voice recovering its smooth businessman's tone. You want to play hardball? Let's talk about elder care laws. About competency hearings. About a son's right to protect his mother's interests when she's clearly not thinking clearly. Don't you dare. Kate's voice could have frozen hell. Don't you dare try to use Mom's illness against her. It's not about using anything. It's about facts. Medical facts. Eric's smile was razor sharp. How long has it been since her last cognitive assessment? How many medications is she on now? A judge might be very interested in how those could affect her decision-making abilities. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Kate felt her professional knowledge warring with her personal fury. She knew exactly how Eric could twist medical facts to his advantage, how he could manipulate the system meant to protect their mother into a weapon against her. But as she opened her mouth to respond, Helen stepped forward, her cane tapping decisively on the hardwood floor. I had a complete cognitive assessment 2 weeks ago, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. With Dr. Ramirez. It's all documented. All part of the files I've been preparing. Eric's confident smile faltered. What files? The ones that show exactly when and how you accessed my accounts. The ones that prove I was fully aware and documenting everything, even as I prayed I was wrong about what you were doing. Helen's hand still shook, but her gaze was steady. I may have Parkinson's, Eric, but I was an accountant for 40 years. Numbers don't lie, even when sons do. The grandfather clock struck 5, each chime like a verdict. Kate watched her brother's facade crumble, replaced by something desperate and dangerous. He glanced at the window, the door, the USB drive still clutched in their mother's trembling hand. You have a choice to make, Kate said quietly. Right here, right now. And whatever you decide in the next few minutes will determine whether we face this as a family, or as opponents in a courtroom. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a summer storm approaching. As Eric opened his mouth to respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID glowed clearly in the dimming light, SEC Investigation Unit. Eric stared at his buzzing phone as if it were a venomous snake. The SEC Investigation Unit's call continued to ring, its harsh vibration echoing in the tension-filled room. With trembling fingers, he declined the call, but the damage was done. The look of terror in his eyes told Kate everything she needed to know. It's not just our money, is it? She asked quietly. What else have you done? The storm outside grew closer, thunder rolling across the sky like nature's own commentary on their family drama. Eric sank into the nearest chair, his expensive suit wrinkled and damp with stress-induced sweat. The crypto investments, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. They weren't just personal trades. I was managing other people's money. A lot of other people's money. Helen's sharp intake of breath cut through the room. The investment club you started in Chicago? They trusted me, Eric continued, as if he hadn't heard her. Colleagues, friends, their parents, everyone wanted in on the crypto boom. And when things started going wrong, I thought I could cover the losses temporarily. Just move some money around until the market recovered. How much? Kate asked, though she dreaded the answer. Millions. The word fell from Eric's lips like a death sentence. The second mortgage on the house was supposed to buy me time to fix it. But then the SEC started asking questions, and some of the investors began demanding their money back. Another crack of thunder, closer now. Rain began to patter against the windows, distorting the late afternoon light into weird patterns across the floor. All this time, Helen said, her voice heavy with realization, you weren't just trying to save our house. You were trying to stay out of prison. Eric buried his face in his hands. For the first time since this nightmare began, Kate saw genuine tears streaming down his cheeks. Not the calculated display of emotion he'd shown earlier, but real, raw grief. I never meant for any of this to happen, he sobbed. I just wanted to be successful, to make Dad proud. To be more than just another small-town nobody. Your father was proud of you, Helen said softly. Not because of your business ventures or your fancy suits, but because you were his son. He would have been proud of you even if you'd failed, as long as you'd failed honestly. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof of their old Victorian home. Kate moved to close the windows, pausing to look out at the street where she and Eric had learned to ride bikes, where their father had taught them to drive, where so many family memories were etched into every crack in the sidewalk. We can't save you from the consequences of your actions, Kate said finally, turning back to her brother. But maybe we can help you face them with dignity. Eric looked up, his face tear-stained and confused. What do you mean? Mom's evidence, Kate gestured to the USB drive, it's comprehensive enough to put you away for a long time. But if you cooperate now, if you come clean to the SEC, help them trace the money, make restitution where you can, maybe there's a chance for, not redemption, exactly, but at least a path forward. The investors, Helen added, her voice growing stronger. They deserve to know the truth. And you deserve a chance to tell it yourself, before it's forced out of you. Eric's phone buzzed again, another call from the SEC. This time, he stared at it with something like resolution in his eyes. If I do this, he said slowly, if I confess everything, what happens to you? To the house? We'll figure it out, Kate said firmly. That's what families do. The real kind, not the ones built on lies. Helen moved to the desk one final time, pulling out yet another document. I've already spoken with the bank. They're willing to work with us on restructuring the first mortgage, given the circumstances. The house payment will be tight, but with both our incomes. Both? Kate turned to her mother in surprise. I may not be able to work as an accountant anymore, Helen said, a glimmer of her old strength showing through, but I've been offered a part-time position consulting for the bank's fraud prevention department. Apparently, my recent experience makes me uniquely qualified. Despite everything, Kate felt a smile tugging at her lips. Outside, the storm was beginning to pass, rays of evening sunlight breaking through the clouds. Eric's phone rang a third time. He took a deep breath, looking from his mother to his sister. I'm going to lose everything, aren't I? No, Helen said gently. You're going to lose the things you never really had. But maybe, just maybe, you'll find something you lost a long time ago, yourself. The grandfather clock struck 6 as Eric answered the call. This is Eric Anderson, he said, his voice steady for the first time that day. Yes, I've been expecting your call. I have something I need to tell you. As Eric walked into the kitchen to continue his conversation, Helen reached for Kate's hand. Together, they stood in their family home, surrounded by the evidence of past deceits but also by the promise of hard-won honesty. We'll be okay, Kate said, squeezing her mother's hand gently. It won't be easy, but we'll be okay. Helen's tremors had calmed somewhat, her grip firm despite her illness. I know, she said, watching the last rays of sunlight paint their walls golden. Because this time, we're standing on the truth. The grandfather clock ticked on, no longer counting down to disaster but marking the beginning of something new, a future built not on dreams of easy wealth or false success, but on the solid foundation of family, integrity, and redemption.